There's a specific kind of silence that only exists at Lake Juniper, soft, undisturbed and earned. It rolls over the pine trees like morning fog, cradles the wooden cabins in its arms, and hushes the world outside. For me, that silence had always been a retreat, not an escape. My lake cabin wasn't a vacation home, it was my anchor, perched on the edge of the eastern cove. The place had belonged to my grandfather before me. He built it by hand after coming back from the war, carving a sanctuary out of wilderness long before there were neighborhoods, paved roads, or a thing called an HOA. That last part was crucial. Before the HOA, the Juniper Shores Homeowners Association, didn't even exist when my family first settled here. It bloomed 2 years ago, born from moneyed retirees who wanted uniformity and value preservation. They started a subdivision just up the ridge, then slowly extended their influence like ivy across the lake's edge, enveloping homes, rewriting codes, swallowing freedom under fine print. I never signed their covenant. My land sat outside their jurisdiction, legally, officially, completely exempt. But try telling that to Karen Delaney. Karen wasn't elected president of the HOA, she declared herself, a middle-aged ex-realtor with a surgically sculpted smile and an iron grip on her clipboard. She ruled Juniper Shores like a monarch in designer flats. Most folks feared her. The rest avoided her. I wasn't either of those people. Our encounters started small. A note pinned to my gate about my non-regulation mailbox. A warning that my boat parked 50 feet from the water was an eyesore. A photograph taped to my front door, capturing the moment I grilled steaks over an open flame. No open fire without permit, it read, underlined 3 times. I ignored every single one, so when I invited Marcus up for the weekend, I wasn't thinking about Karen. I was thinking about good company, fresh fish, and a break from the political, a circus that followed my old friend everywhere. Marcus Dunn had been my college roommate and was now the state attorney general. He was the kind of guy who could dissect a criminal case over eggs and toast but still appreciated the art of doing absolutely nothing. When he called to say he needed a weekend away from donors and debates, I told him, come to the lake, we'll fish, we'll drink. And I promise not to say the word bill unless it's from a bar. He arrived Friday evening, driving an SUV that practically screamed government. Black, polished, tinted enough to make the feds jealous. I knew the moment Karen saw it, her little HOA radar would light up like a Christmas tree. Still, I underestimated just how far she'd go. The next morning, sunlight danced across the lake as Marcus and I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, enjoying the stillness. We hadn't even made it to breakfast when the peace shattered. The screen door slammed open so hard it bounced on its hinges. Karen Delaney marched into my cabin like she was leading a raid, a floral blouse, crisp khaki pants, and of course, the ever-present clipboard hugged to her chest like a sacred text. She snapped, jabbing her pen toward me. You've got an unauthorized guest staying on the property. I blinked. Karen, what the hell are you doing in my house? This is an HOA matter, she declared, stepping fully into the living room. We've had multiple complaints about unregistered visitors, non-compliant vehicles, and potential short-term rental activity. This, she waved at Marcus, isn't allowed. Marcus stood slowly, calm but alert. And who are you? Exactly, Karen puffed up. Karen Delaney, HOA, president of Juniper Shores. You're trespassing under Municipal Code and HOA Regulation 4.3 non-resident occupancy. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Do you have a legal warrant or just a clipboard? With delusions of grandeur, Karen's eyes narrowed. Excuse me. She asked you a question, I said flatly. What are you doing breaking into private property? Karen looked between us, her confidence slipping just slightly, but she held her ground. This entire area falls under our jurisdiction. You're in violation. I stepped forward, voice low and even. Karen, this cabin isn't under your control. It never was. Now, I suggest you turn around and walk out that door before you make a mistake you can't walk back from. She scoffed, clearly not used to resistance. This will be reported. Good, Marcus replied, pulling out his wallet. Be sure to spell my name right when you do. Marcus Dunn, State Attorney General. The color drained from her face. For a brief, perfect second, silence returned. But this time it was different. This time it was charged. Karen backed out slowly, muttering something incoherent as she retreated down the steps. The clipboard now clutched like a shield. As the screen door creaked shut behind her, Marcus took another sip of coffee. I take it this happens a lot. I chuckled. Only when she's bored. He nodded thoughtfully, eyes scanning the lake. Well, he said, setting his cup down, maybe it's time she wasn't. Karen's retreat might have ended with the door slamming shut, but her echo lingered like a foul scent. Even after she disappeared down the trail, clipboard in hand and pride bruised, I knew it wasn't over. Karen didn't believe in defeat, delays, and she'd just tasted something she hadn't expected. Resistance. Marcus stood quietly at the window, watching her disappear into the trees. Has she always been that, entitled? He asked, voice level but laced with disbelief. Worse, actually, I replied, grabbing the coffee pot for a refill. You just saw her in daylight. She's more dangerous in writing. Fines, threats, legal jargon. She doesn't understand it's her preferred weaponry. Marcus gave a dry laugh. A self-declared sovereign of suburban law. Classic. He turned back toward me, mug still warm in hand. Tell me something. You said this cabin isn't under their jurisdiction. That true? Absolutely, I said. Zoned separately. Surveyed back in '78. Documented every which way. Her HOA maps stop a full 100 feet from my property line. She just pretends that facts bend to her clipboard. He nodded slowly, thoughtful. Then she committed criminal trespass this morning. Possibly more. The words hung in the air. Not as a threat, not even as a reaction, just a statement of law. Coming from anyone else, it might have felt overblown. But Marcus wasn't just my friend. He was the top legal authority in the state. He didn't deal in exaggeration. I studied his face, trying to read beyond the poker expression he always wore when processing. You thinking about making it official? I'm thinking, he said carefully, that people like Karen don't stop unless someone makes them. The rest of that day passed in silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind where something bigger looms just beneath the surface. Marcus spent most of the afternoon on his phone, checking state property databases, reviewing boundary surveys I'd long since memorized, and jotting down notes like a trial lawyer preparing opening arguments. Me. I cleaned fish and chopped wood. We dealt with tension in different ways. That night, we sat by the fire pit beneath a clear sky. The lake shimmered under the stars, unaware or unconcerned about the petty war brewing at its edge. I've seen a lot of abuse of power in my line of work, Marcus said finally. Usually it's buried in contracts or campaign finance, but this is small-town tyranny, raw, undisciplined and loud. I tossed a pine cone into the flames. She thinks this place is her kingdom, he smirked. Then it's time someone reminded her she's trespassing in more ways than one. 2 days later, Karen returned. But not alone. A white SUV bearing the HOA emblem rolled up to the front of my cabin like it was an official government vehicle. Out stepped Karen, sunglasses perched high on her forehead, followed by 2 board members, Brian, a yes-man who'd once fined a neighbor for having wind chimes, and Teresa, a retired accountant with a vendetta against garden gnomes. They didn't knock. I opened the door before they could, blocking the frame with crossed arms. Karen didn't smile. We're conducting a formal inspection, she said curtly. Complaints have been filed regarding noise, unauthorized occupancy, and suspicious activity. Suspicious activity, I repeated flatly, such as Karen's eyes flicked toward the living room window. Hosting public officials on private property. We believe this qualifies as commercial use, which, as you know, is prohibited by HOA, Regulation 12.7 behind me. Marcus appeared tie-gone, sleeves rolled up, casual but commanding. He stepped forward with the quiet force of someone who didn't need to raise his voice to own a room. I'm not here in any official capacity, he said calmly. But if you're implying my presence is unlawful, I'd advise caution. Karen stiffened. I'm within my rights. You're not, Marcus interrupted. You're on private property you don't govern. You're attempting to enforce rules that don't apply against a resident you have no legal claim over. And if you set 1 foot inside this cabin without a signed warrant, you'll be in violation of Oregon State Law Section 164.245, criminal trespass in the 2nd degree. Brian shifted uncomfortably. Teresa looked down at her shoes. Karen, ever bold, drew herself up. This isn't over. No, Marcus said, tone sharpening. It's just beginning. Karen turned on her heel and stormed off, her entourage trailing behind her like deflated parade balloons. As their SUV disappeared up the road, Marcus turned to me. We need to talk to your county recorder. I want every plat map, easement record, and title deed they've got. If she's made a habit of this, she won't just lose her power, she'll lose her freedom. And just like that, the tone had changed. This wasn't personal anymore, it was legal. By Monday morning, we weren't just fishing buddies anymore, we were 2 men on a mission. Marcus had spent the night on the cabin's porch, laptop open, legal statutes pulled up like battle maps. What began as a casual weekend retreat had evolved into something larger, something heavier. Karen hadn't merely crossed a line, she'd drawn a new one, deep and unlawful, and stepped over it without blinking. People like her, Marcus said, rubbing sleep from his eyes as we sat over black coffee, don't stop until they're either humbled or handcuffed, and he meant to find out which one she'd earn. We started at the county recorder's office, a quiet brick building nestled behind a grove of cedar trees. The clerk, a gray-haired woman named Marnie, recognized me right away. I'd been coming there for years, mostly to renew cabin permits or pay property taxes. But this time was different. Marcus flashed his credentials. We're requesting plat maps, zoning history, and HOA charter documents for Juniper Shores. Specifically, their claimed boundaries and any recent amendments. Marnie squinted. That HOA has been busy, filed over 30 enforcement actions. In the last 6 months alone, she pulled files, scanned documents, and printed maps. What emerged from that pile of paperwork was damning. Juniper Shores had quietly altered their association boundaries just 8 months ago. On paper, it looked like an innocent expansion. But the survey lines had been redrawn to include properties like mine, ones that had never agreed to join and never signed the covenant. No public vote, no notices, just Karen's signature, forged. Jurisdiction. Marcus leaned back, reviewing a notarized document with Karen's name scribbled under the heading Boundary Adjustment Form C12. She's not just overreaching, he muttered. She's manufacturing authority. The more we dug, the deeper it went. HOA funds misallocated, board elections conducted without quorum, false citations issued to residents who couldn't afford legal push. One elderly man had been fined $900 for trimming a pine tree without HOA arborist approval. Another family was told they had 30 days to remove their chicken coop even though it was legal under state zoning. Karen had weaponized bureaucracy, spent the next 2 days interviewing residents' quiet voices behind closed doors. Fear lingered like mildew in that neighborhood. People whispered instead of speaking. Several showed us piles of letters from the HOA, all stamped in red, all threatening liens or fines. One single mother, Sarah, teared up as she handed Marcus a citation for unapproved curtain color. She makes us feel like criminals in our own homes, she whispered. Marcus took the letter carefully. Not for much longer. The turning point came when we found the drone footage. A resident named Paul, an ex-IT guy, had set up a motion-triggered camera on his roof after noticing strange flying objects above his yard. What he caught was stunning. A small drone, branded with HOA stickers, hovering outside bedroom windows, snapping photos. Karen calls it compliance patrol, Paul said. Said it's for code enforcement. Marcus's expression hardened. That's unlawful surveillance. We compiled everything, dozens of documents, testimony, visual evidence, and built a timeline. With each puzzle piece, Karen's power unraveled. This wasn't about nosy neighbors anymore. This was a deliberate abuse of authority. A paper trail of intimidation and fraud. That night, back at the cabin, Marcus made the call. Special investigators looped in, he said, closing his phone. They're issuing subpoenas by end of week. A silence followed, not the eerie kind Karen had shattered, but one filled with purpose. We weren't just reacting anymore. We were building a case. Marcus stood, stretching his back. She'd never see it coming. I looked out at the lake, moonlight rippling across the water. You sure this won't blow back on you politically? He shrugged. Let it. People deserve to know that power, no matter how small or local, isn't immune to the law. A knock echoed on the cabin door. I opened it to find a delivery driver holding a thick envelope. From the office of the HOA, he said. They said it was urgent. Inside was a cease and desist letter, accusations of harassment, threats of civil litigation, and a formal demand that Marcus leave the community immediately. Marcus read it once, then again. He folded it carefully, placed it on the table, and smiled. She just gave me probable cause. Outside, thunder rumbled low in the distance. A summer storm building on the edge of the lake. Karen had declared war. We'd just started firing back. The storm arrived 2 days later on schedule, as if summoned by consequence. Rain battered the lake in relentless sheets. Wind thrashing through the trees like an ancient fury awakened. But it wasn't nature that had Karen Delaney trembling. That Thursday morning, it was the line of state vehicles crawling up Juniper Ridge, tires grinding against gravel, carrying with them the full weight of truth. Inside the community hall where Karen held her self-styled court, the air turned electric. The HOA board had called an emergency meeting to address resident misinformation and defamation campaigns. Flyers had gone out. Accusations were expected. Apologies were not. Marcus and I arrived precisely at 10 a.m., stepping inside the oversized room lined with folding chairs, potted plants, and walls plastered with HOA rules like Holy Scripture. Karen stood at the front, flanked by Brian and Teresa. Her usual smugness had cracked at the edges. Dozens of residents had shown up. They looked tired, soaked, but ready, many clenching letters, documents, or printouts like shields. Karen opened the meeting with a brittle voice. We've been under attack. False information is being spread by outsiders intending to destabilize our peaceful community. As your president, a voice cut through the room like a blade. You're not our president anymore. It was Sarath, a single mother. She stood, holding a manila envelope. Her voice shook, but her eyes were steel. I'm filing a motion to dissolve this HOA under state statute 94.630, citing abuse of power, unlawful fines, and illegal surveillance. Gasps rippled across the room. Karen paled before she could respond. Marcus stepped forward and presented his badge. My name is Marcus Dunn. I'm the state attorney general. I've been investigating this association for the past 10 days. As of this morning, the HOA board is under official review for multiple criminal violations. He paused, turning to the board. Karen Delaney, Brian Keller, and Teresa Hemsley, you are named in a subpoena issued by the State Ethics and Oversight Committee. You're being charged with criminal trespass, misuse of public funds, unauthorized surveillance, and falsification of property documents. Karen's mouth opened, but no words followed. Her clipboard fell from her hand and hit the floor with a hollow smack. The state investigator entered next, flanked by uniformed deputies. Karen and her board were escorted out in stunned silence, no dramatic screams, no last-minute denials. Just the whimper of a regime finally stripped of its illusion of control. What followed was swift. The HOA, once bloated with self-importance and unchecked authority, was dissolved by majority vote within 48 hours. Residents cheered as signs were torn down, fines were revoked, and drones were grounded. Sarah was appointed interim liaison for a newly formed neighborhood council, voluntary, transparent, and built on actual community needs. As for my cabin, no more notices, no more knocks, just peace. Marcus stayed one more night before heading back to the capital. We sat on the porch as dusk settled, the storm having passed, the lake calm once more. You did more than just fight her, I said, handing him a glass of bourbon. You gave these people their dignity back. He shook his head. I didn't do anything they couldn't have done. I just reminded them they had the right. He looked out across the water. Funny how tyranny wears such small clothes sometimes. A clipboard, a smile, a rulebook printed in Comic Sans. I laughed. Don't mock the HOA font. We toasted in silence. Before leaving the next morning, Marcus left behind a sealed envelope with a note, for when she tries again. Inside was a signed cease and desist order, pre-approved, just in case Karen ever forgot the laws that brought her down. Last I heard, she'd relocated to a condo in a neighboring town. Quiet, gated. Rumor has it, she applied to join the board of its HOA. The application was denied. With prejudice. As for me, I stayed at the lake, repaired the old dock, painted the shutters the exact shade of forest green Karen once flagged as inconsistent, with community tone, and every morning I brewed 2 cups of coffee, one for myself, and one for the quiet, because the silence at Lake Juniper had returned, and this time it wasn't earned through isolation, it was won through justice.